Cool. All right. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Well, should we wait for Nancy to get back?
She'll be here.
Thank you.
Great. I feel like I don't need a microphone.
I'm glad you guys all wore red today.
Really?
Well, thank you for finding the room and coming to hang out with us for a little bit.
So I think we should just talk.
That's what it's fine. That's why I think
let's
it feels
talk
weird and
informal,
really formal. Yeah. So I'm here if you need anything.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
That's great.
I'll be a
That's
little
great,
back
yeah.
Are you actually here as a participant?
I'm keeping.
Okay.
So I think you know. So I mean, Denise has been working with us.
Yeah.
You know what we're doing. So I think we could just. I mean, I did go look at the other room, and I think you're right. There's people in there, like Madeline's in there.
But I could also just say with the reason I was coming to this, not even though I love seeing you all, it's like the reason, and I mentioned this downstairs, is that the fact that you all won, or, you know, is a pretty big victory. You know?
Yeah.
So I don't think the county as a whole is that aware of the victory, and so I believe since all the county council, since it was such an amazing vote, part of the question is how to sort of turn the victory that we had on this into a much bigger thing. So I don't know, if you were probably already planning to talk about like the eco district. I know there's another session on the eco district, but I think that sort of where you are now, part of it's that legal sort of piece and the outrage about the fact you can't communicate with the district council. But
Maybe that because there's ex parte, which means we still cannot communicate this case to the people who voted on this case.
But so it might be good for a quick summary of, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I would appreciate
that.
So what we could do is.
I guess I'm the one
Hi,
person
come
who
on
got
in.
that.
Come on in. Come on in.
Hey.
Oh, Bianca. Hi.
So we can do so, Andy. I think that's like the really sort of part of the question. The ultimate question is like, how do we take parlay what we've done?
Right.
What we, we're asked to do basically was to talk about what happened and how we succeeded, and we presume that there'd be other activists here who were interested in sort of how we had, how we did it, how we did it. So. So we could talk, we could talk really, really briefly. I actually have a handout on lessons learned. And so maybe we could just quickly do this. We have some pictures. We'll give you a sense of what we were doing.
And then I think we should go into that, because that's really the.
Yeah, without getting into a lot of detail about, a lot of the case itself.
And if anyone who would want to know more.
But we can talk more about
We
that.
can do that.
Yeah. So, this will give you an idea of the context.
Yeah, so there are 4 municipalities at the headwaters of the Anacostia River where it forms. And this gives you a bit of, what the demographic composition is like. And particularly noteworthy is the household income relative to the counties. It's a relatively, the 4 towns make up around 14,000 people. You see the number of people who are school age. So
That's school age only kids.
yeah, that's school age.
Yeah.
They were the applicant for the.
Yeah.
As you see, really close to where the river forms, sites right here, and you see.
That's the site, right?
That's the
Red.
site, red.
And these are the community.
The yellow are the historic sites.
There's 11 historic sites.
Those are
schools.
Yeah,
There was
and the green are schools, and
Yeah.
the waterfront is across.
Yeah, here's the waterfront park right here, so just across the street.
Yeah, so the plant actually occupies this acreage here,
Yeah,
this piece here, and the park is literally across the street.
yeah.
Get it in there.
Picture of the park, you see the river in the background. A whole lot of use in this park. There's, how many rowing schools are there now? There's
22.
Yeah,
22.
yeah. And there's been
Middle school through college.
there were portions of the bike trail, and now it's been linked up, and you can bike from here all the way into, well, where your activism is taking place, literally, quite literally. There's lots of traffic within kind of a small area, so it's dangerous to walk around.
Right, the area was designated a TNI by the former county executive based upon, one of the factors was pedestrian injuries and fatalities. And since January 2017, there have been 2 fatalities within 2 blocks of the Bladensburg site.
Here's,
Okay,
here's,
yeah, this is.
we're saying the best ones, yeah. This is the block, this is the block plant that was built in the early 60s. It's 50s, okay, so it's grandfathered in.
Not subject to other environmental regulations.
Right.
And that photo is not from the 1950s.
No, that's.
No, we just took that.
Yeah. We just took that, although it does look like it could be,
So I would
doesn't it?
just say somewhere you should mark that this is the current photo.
Yeah, this is the current.
Yeah.
house.
Yeah, it's a current, it's 2018.
All these are.
I
all
took
these are
the,
current.
that photo.
Another photo of the plant, goes up to see the condition of it.
Chris, are these all from the video?
No, these are photos, these 3 that you've seen so far along.
Okay.
Now, these are stills from a video that,
This is their video.
their video.
Their
This
videos.
is their video.
Look at the lovely sunlight character.
Yeah,
This is their stuff.
yeah,
It looks like something out of the industrial era.
So you
yeah.
mean this is like on their website or something?
Yes.
Yes, to sort of be like,
It's-
hey,
it's-
this is a great company?
Yeah.
It's our-
Yeah.
They actually never went to that, wow. Well, Obama visited there, when he was, and he said this was a great example of
That wasn't a great example of
jobs.
No.
And they produce an eco block,
Oh, that's right.
so
Yeah,
it's
it's a
all
carbon capture block.
carbon capture block.
Carbon
So
capture.
And it deals with water
Water.
issues. It helps manage water filtration.
Yeah.
It's a permeable paver, basically.
Oh,
okay.
So you can see there's staff,
And he did get.
staff with no helmets, no respirators, and no goggles on.
Wow.
Wait, when you say carbon capture, you mean like?
It sequesters CO2
Oh.
into
Yeah.
the
Oh,
block itself.
okay, thanks.
Which, by the way, all that has nothing to do with the proposed, thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. This is the kiln area where they cook block. Finally dusty. This is,
Here's the stacks of the block.
Everywhere.
yeah, look at the
Come
dust on.
stand under one
Yeah.
of those.
Yeah,
Right, and staff are not wearing hard hats. They're walking
That's
around.
really gonna help you.
Yeah,
I felt something in my head.
yeah.
It was 50 tons of block. Here's the dust.
that's the stockpiles of some of the materials needed to make the,
Yeah, that's my
Make
photo.
concrete.
again,
Yeah.
photo of the person.
Yeah,
Here's the church. This is the historic African American church that is literally the closest part of it to where it is 30 feet. And
you see the dust.
you can see the dust, and they were only able to conduct Sunday services if there was they do their funerals and all that on site because they only can be on Sundays because that's the only day the plant stopped working.
And how big is the congregation?
I went by there on Sunday and I was impressed. There was at least 25 cars parked on the street. At one point, I think.
Small.
But I was surprised at how many people were going.
I
And
mean,
just
this
so,
church was a site on the Underground Railroad.
right,
It's a very important sign.
Yeah.
Right.
So this gives you more context of what surrounds the church.
This is a view from the church front yard. Yeah.
Yeah.
The plant is right there.
So I'm assuming the church was there first, and then.
Right.
church has been
Yeah, the
there
industrial
for
area
years,
grew-
and then we just
Built
go around it
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
in the
The
you said
church,
1956
the church,
or something.
yeah, the church was founded in the 1850s by the Plummer family.
This is another side of the plant,
The back.
the backside where they would, they were proposing for the trucks, access and egress from those. it's Moss Run, which flows directly into the Anacostia. So as you can see, it was a pretty lengthy process.
Yeah. Your process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so starting out, we just, this is a sample of education materials that we did.
So that's so good. And who did that?
Actually, it was Dr. Wilson's students that did this.
Yeah.
They helped us. They helped us. And a big part of our push was to, well, we did a lot of community notifying of the process itself to keep folks apprised. This is up here because we had community meetings with community leaders and the public, but primarily the first were community leaders, and Reverend Dockett, who is the pastor of St. Paul's Church, came to talk about, the dust and the situation with his congregation. And part of our big role was really to encourage people to know about the process and to come out and testify. Okay? And so the zoning hearing examiner hearing on August 22nd was really, the culmination of having the community come out and testify, which had a significant impact in the denial decision because community testimony was extensively quoted in the decision.
This manifest is collected it from one step of the church. Just
Yeah.
one step.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one step of their,
He had a great quote. He said that he often had to shovel the steps before his congregants could come into the building. And he used a snow shovel.
one of the tools that came out of this process, I think this was getting into a year, was the development of the mapping of areas. It was very helpful for us to have an understanding of the cumulative health risks for folks that live in our area. Being able to show folks, on a map, this is what geology is. This is a flyer for campaigning for the first appeal hearing before the district council. That was flyer, but also posted on Facebook. So, and very simple, what asking people to do. Part of it is where, we wore red, so we could easily be identified in the audience. The district council could visually see us out there. Communications and press strategy. In each step of the campaign were like mini campaigns of what we were going to do, and this was press release following announcing the denial. But at each point of having the ZHE hearings, having when we filed the appeal, is that we were ready to announce what happened, so the community was well informed.
I'm just adding.
Yeah.
This is totally precedent. You guys have to stay on all of this, and I know Rhonda's talked to you about that, but I just feel like what happened in DC was they basically gave zero notice. Like,
We had that too.
We had that
it was a
problem
couple of
too.
months between,
That's what we had.
it was a month between application and court hearing. And decision. So I'm more fascinated, this took
Well,
2 years.
I would say, we had to stay on top of the process. Well, we had to learn about the process, but we had to stay on top of the process continuously. And have an understanding of how it worked. An example is of not having notice, when the case was transferred from the planning board to the zoning hearing examiner, there were 100 persons of record registered, and the ZAG only sent notice out to 4 parties. Okay.
And who were the 4 parties?
Ernest Meyer itself, their attorney, the town of Bladensburg, and the town of Bladensburg's attorney, and that's it.
So none of the other 4 towns were notified.
Nobody.
Nobody, the public,
Nobody.
we were all parties of record, yeah, we were not notified.
And then it became at some point a circular argument in that, well, how can people show up for the next round if they haven't been notified? But then they took it as, well, you showed up, therefore people were able to know.
See, we
Yeah,
did such
exactly,
a great job here.
Well,
Yeah.
the way that we knew at that time, it was to see the site posted. A month in advance, because we were watching. And, so that showed up, and, when people were not notified, we kept waiting and waiting, when is our notice coming in the mail? When are we gonna be notified? And they didn't come. So we encouraged persons of record to write letters, affidavits actually, that they were not notified and requesting continuance, which the zoning hearing examiner denied.
The one thing that we're trying to do is really strategically, so a lot of it, and I just handed out this, it's like sort of lessons, because Jacoby really wanted sort of take away lessons,
Which is great.
So, the first thing is really learning. It's like the work requires like constant staying on top of learning about both, we were not zoning experts when we started this, but we sure became experts in special exceptions over the course of this. And so that was really critical, was to understand the process. And what we also knew, that was a very simple calculation, was that the more that we could throw a monkey wrench into the process and delay it, the more it would cost, Ernest Meyer to keep it up. And every time we did that, it would make it just more difficult for them. There'd be more pressure on them because we were basically, community volunteers. We didn't have that kind of expense. And we were aware, because we understood, and this is where like the learning thing is like, know your opponent. You need to know who you're up against and what their interests are. We knew his interests were very different from our interests.
And he being Ernest Meyer.
Yeah, Ernest Meyer, the company, that the interest of the opponent, in this case, the applicant for special exception, was the company. And then the company's interests were clearly not in the line what we thought were the community interests. But we also knew that his interest was, we could sort of push and pressure what he knew his interest to be, which was saving as much money and doing this as cheaply as possible. So every time, so there was a number of steps where we.
Can you ask me one? That he
Let me finish. So that there was sufficient delays, and we did that in several parts where we requested an additional planning board hearing. So every place, by understanding this process, we were able to create more time for ourselves. And that's something, the more you understand the legal process that you're entitled to, or even if there's ambiguities, if you can push on the ambiguities, it'll buy you time to do more of what you need to do. The other piece of that is, and this is like for organizing, it's like a smaller tactical group that can really do your strategic planning, that have different but overlapping skills is critical, because all was basically, the core group was really 4 people who had overlapping but really different skill sets. And so it gave each of us a particular thing to take care of, so we didn't all have to do everything or figure everything out. So the needs were needed.
I think the point that I wanted to make was that there is a plant there that's fully operational, multi-million-dollar operation. What he was trying to do was keep going with that operation and add another whole component on top of it. And so I think that was the other thing that we had to communicate to the community. You know, well, wait a minute, he's already there, what's the deal, right? And we just said, well, and so it was really difficult to explain to people that you're not gonna have just this plant and another plant on top of it in that very tiny, tiny footprint, which means X amount more trucks, X amount more cars. So, some people originally thought, oh, he was gonna close that plant and do something else, so I think that's the other thing that was really difficult on that initially, was explaining what was gonna happen there.
But I mean, along the lines of what Denise is talking about, there's really, and especially in very low income communities, there's kind of this mainstream ethos of pro-business and growth without regard to the impact. And so, and there's a lot of obfuscation of what that really means in the community. And so instead of really fomenting community engagement and conversation, which we really took on the role of having community discussions about this to try to parse some of this stuff more carefully. And we were always very careful to be factual, accurate, and not have hyperbole about it, saying, oh, he's a dirty dog and blah, blah, blah. We just were, here are the facts, you decide for yourself, let's go to the community. That was the ethos we took, and we feel like that helped us enormously, because you can not agree with us, and we've always welcomed dissent at our meetings. In fact, the council for the corporation almost attended every one of our community meetings, including the last one we had, which was sort of saying we won. And you know, I was like, "Where's Patrick?" You know, like it's not going to be a meeting without Patrick.
And then he came in.
And he walked. He was there. Well, and the other thing is, like we said, if what we're saying is not accurate, please feel free to correct us.
Yeah.
Never once was there a correction to what we said. So, I mean, so the struggles are really fighting sort of very, you know, both the conditions you're working under, like a low income community that has low resources, but also there's an overlay, depending on who your leadership is in that community, of sort of not understanding that pro-growth isn't necessarily in the interest of that community. Like you're saying, Buzzard Point is probably a very good example, where whatever kind of growth is going on is going to push people out, as opposed to thinking about how to revitalize and redistribute resources to a community that's perfectly fine, but needs, you know, to have the resources that are being extracted need to be returned for those communities. So it really to us, I think, you know, there were things like learning, sharing, that's the communication piece, which Denise did a lot of strategizing and organizing. Those are like the key elements of successful campaigns. Even if you lose your struggle, the important thing is to build solidarity and knowledge in your communities, because that's what will create resilience, is to begin to build the capacity. Because everybody who can move away will move away, and then there's everyone else. And that's what we see in these communities. So, and that's what we want to be able to, you know, strengthen, you know, capacities. And the other thing is, when we were talking about this, these are long-term investments. This is like, a lot of people are used to, like, you know, in and out with this work. No, this is.
I need to hear that.
Do not.
Don't get
It is
discouraged.
a long.
But it's natural to feel that.
It is not. It's a long slog.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, each time you're building the capital in your community of connection and knowledge and capacity, each person, that's exponential, and it helps build someone else in their life. It is. It's a collective process, even when you feel like it's not. Like, I know for us, we often feel like, you know, like even today, like, where is everybody? But we also know that each time we touch someone with the work we're doing, they'll carry it somewhere for us. So you have to remember that, right? So, and we feel like this is the importance of this stuff is the lessons learned are not that, you know, it's a complicated situation, but we learned that a small group, that sort of adage of a small group is really true. We have a lot of supporters, hundreds, but a small group that's really focused. And the other thing about the focus is that we also learned you do nothing outside of this is sort of like campaign driven. Like, meaning, you know, you have a focus of what you're trying to achieve. So you have to be like laser focused. And sometimes in our meetings, we say, we're not discussing that. Nope, we're not going there. I mean, I know, sometimes one of us would shake our head like, but we can't. We're not creating an organization per se. We're very focused on this. And in fact, you must be laser focused all the way through. Yep.
There's housing, there's.
Right.
Yeah, but if you have a campaign or something you're working on, it's like, this is a campaign-driven process. This is not the community, the big picture. And we're actually, our CDC is now looking at how to go back, in a way, kind of start over. And begin to do the base level organizing that our community needs to provide resilience. Just put in some grants to do basic
It's
organizing.
never really happened in the communities, and you can't skip over that.
Can't skip over, you cannot skip, because when you skip, you get things like, you get leadership that comes and goes, not necessarily invested, not in the long haul, have a different agenda. But if you want to build long-term growth and resiliency in the community, you must build a community itself, that resiliency. And so that's what we're like, we're back to square one. And that becomes, I'll tell you, I think it really becomes exponential. Once you get some momentum, all of a sudden, things pop. You get a little bit more ahead. And then you have a little setback, but the growth is deeper, it's stronger, as opposed to superficial. People float away. We did these facade improvements. Well, okay, on our tire place and on our, auto repair and on our
We
concrete
did a lot of
plant.
other projects.
Right, we
over
put up
30
a sign in front of the concrete plant. I mean, is that going to do it? No. So anyway, so that's sort of the.
Did you have more slides for that intro?
No, that's it.
Perfect.
So I think that's sort of that's sort of where we're at now. I don't know, our goal was to just have conversation, and I think what you were saying is really, really important.
Is there, is this the end for that? I mean, is there any risk that they could put in another?
Yeah, so they have appealed, so where we are right now is that they have it, we weren't sure this was gonna happen, they've appealed the district, so in Prince George's County, the county council, which is by district for the entire county, they rule also as basically like a zoning board, and so they ruled against it, right? So that was a great decision that we won. But now the company is appealing now they can appeal that decision to the Maryland Circuit Court. So they decided to do that. So we're in phase 2. So we're moving into phase 2.
But now. You're legal supported with the county government.
Correct.
Which is a very different dynamic than you were in before. So,
Yes.
Yes, before we were in a more oppositional.
So just a little, when the Washington Gas wanted to build a liquefied natural gas plant at the Washington Gas facility in Chillum, and the community rose up to oppose this, and Washington Gas said, "We're doing it. It's not even up to the county." And so, but we did, and so it was a very different instance. We got every local elected official to oppose it, and the planning board was actually good on this, even though the council for the planning board was really bad. We ended up getting the planning board say, "Nope, as a matter of fact, we're writing the zoning that you can't do this." And so Washington Gas said, "We're going to appeal it up to FERC, and we're going to override you." And they never made the decision not to do that, but they actually didn't do it in the end. So where they've appealed to this next court level, because the county government now is working with you, it's kind of like an altered dynamics of that. But it's hard to build a community building piece of that because it's all legal, and so there's nothing for people to go to, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It becomes primarily a legal process at this point. Although no one can tell community activists not to organize, right? So we're already doing our research on the judges trying to, they're elected.
Oh, cool.
We've already figured, see, this is the thing. There's a lot of stuff, and you have to do all your homework, all of it. And when you do your homework,
All parties involved.
you find out things.
All parties involved.
Yeah, and so we research every person, every group, to try to know as much as we can. So in general, that's really true, but we also know that as elected officials, they will be subject to, no matter what lawyer says anything, they will be subject to some level of public pressure. We know that, and we accept that. And that's a different perspective than the lawyers will have. We know that too. But So what we need to do is build then consensus on having a victory like this in the larger community of people around. And that's why networking with other struggles nearby and all of us working together, trying to get like articles in the paper, trying to build a bigger consensus through the community. And we talked about linking people on the river, that the river might be a place, at least for Maryland, DC, and Virginia, where the river, people working along the river communities can all unite.
And your site is right on the river.
Right.
Our
Because
site is
yeah,
where the
there's a
river
reason.
forms.
Yes,
Yeah.
because it's been an
Yeah.
industrialized river. And we don't also want, when it gets cleaned up, that all of a sudden it's like everybody else is gonna be here buying $1 million homes. Like,
Yeah.
The big
Yeah.
concern.
right.
Right.
So there's a bigger coalition work to start thinking about doing, and building consciousness and organizing around these issues. So that there's a bigger kind of social pressure. I would like to actually at some point talk to you more about the Washington Gas thing, partly because I'm dealing with them on other issues. But that's a very interesting story about the kind of pressure, the hubris that they had, and the kind of way the public pushed back and said,
And this whole process is totally separate from the ongoing daily operations of the existing facility,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the,
Yes.
now what are the community feelings about sort of the existing ongoing
Great question.
operations?
Great question.
Yeah.
You want
I sense it's shifted in the last 2 years with our work.
yeah.
It had, we initially got a lot of,
They've always been there.
it's zoned I2, that area's always been like that, it'll always be like that, and that's kind of what we have to accept. Yeah. And I feel that even on our little local political level, that has shifted it a bit. Because before that was, well, that's Bladensburg's decision, so the other towns, or two of the other towns felt like, well, we don't wanna talk about that or comment on it, even though, the pollution doesn't know, and the particular matter doesn't know any boundaries, it's not gonna just stop at the Bladensburg border, so.
It's the funny thing about air.
Yeah, that's funny
Yeah,
thing,
funny
is-
thing.
funny thing about air and wind and all that, so. What else would you say it's changed?
And are they in compliance?
Yeah.
No.
Like, is it- right, so there's, right.
Yeah, so there's,
So Chris has actually we're working with another organization where she's sort of like a paralegal fellow.
Yep.
And so our strategy around the plant was to start really looking at all the regulation issues. And of course, once we learn about that, we also not only learn about what's appropriate for us, but every other concrete plant,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
every other,
Exactly.
there's other concrete and aggregate production in these communities. We found out that area-wise, we're in the largest industrial zoned area in the county. We didn't know that. Chris figured it out from a map. So we're really looking, so the other thing is we started a conversation about, okay, well, how do we change the zoning? I mean, that's where you don't stop asking, except, oh no, you can't do anything. So that should be the key. Whenever somebody tells you you can't do it,
that's a
when
clue
you
for you to
say,
look closer in that area.
Yeah.
that's where you don't want us to do it.
Yeah.
We're gonna look right at that very thing. So we did ask the county about how the zoning process works in terms of rezoning, and we found out there is a way. There's lots of ways to do it. So we're like, don't tell us that now, 'cause, oh boy, we're gonna look at how everything is zoned in our community. So, and because in our community, there's brownfield sites, there's Superfund sites, it's pretty serious. So anyway, so Chris is actually, actually strategically, we're not sure what to do because we're in the lawsuit, and so we don't know how much we can press on them at this point. We're trying to figure all this out, for the existing plan. We don't want to be perceived as unduly, whatever, so we're trying to figure out carefully what the next steps are.
And does the church, is it a historic preservation site? Is there a fund like to preserve the church? Is there
No.
Well, that's something we've been thinking about.
Yeah.
how to use that to help
It's a
the
registered county, historic site.
Okay, it should be like, like
church. It should be.
because if we destroy our history, how are we gonna remember and learn from it?
Well, certain history is preserved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, and some is not.
some it's not. So yes, in fact, and I think that's something that we could look at, and I think that might be a great wedge with the county council, is to say, what do we need to do to help preserve and honor the history of this church and the struggle, you know? So, and that could be, and that's something there'd be a lot of support for and interest, to figure out, you know, can we make the area larger, so we can approach and create space, or say the public street can't be used that way, the way the Ernest Mayer is using it. I mean, the truck traffic there is just horrendous.
Yeah, I'll point out, I mean, we talked about the dust. and
It's
that's-
horrendous,
but-
and it's a main artery.
But it's beyond that, the structure of the church itself is not optimal. And we think it's because of
Oh, yeah.
the ground, what takes place on the site and also the truck traffic going in and out.
And the truck traffic is not part of the zoning. I mean, this is the problem with like the stationary emissions and mobile emissions.
Yes.
Is because they're,
Exactly.
and this is, and it's a, we tried to change that in Maryland law, cause it's kind of ridiculous
It's ridiculous.
that you can get permitted for a stationary facility. And you'll be in total compliance and emissions, and if, you know, whether they are or aren't is a different question. But that like, there's no accounting
For the
for
diesel.
For the
Right.
diesel.
Yeah.
fuel and
But, so I would say that the 47th district, probably because it's the beginning of a new term, and also the lessons learned of this, is that it's another reason to do aggregate impacts at the state level.
Yeah.
And so for them to act as if, oh, we have a great new example of why it's so important in the state of Maryland that we create an aggregate impact, and because it's something like this, and you can actually talk about all the examples of what happened in the most heavily industrialized part of Prince George's County, and then Prince George's County and Baltimore City are the most environmental justice jurisdictions.
And we're seeing, I mean, you see the same things around the Dominion Cove Point facility and the people organizing around there. They're saying, yes, it's terrible, you know, we're gonna be exporting natural gas now, but the problem is with the diesel trucks. The problem with our community is not only the breathing, the traffic accidents, the degrading road infrastructure. And these are rural, one way like roads, and they were not made for this, and so like diesel trucks and this continual, you know, but then you anger the truck laws. They have these like legal pins that bring our trucks.
And that was one argument that we tried to make, because when the railroad overpass was built, which is what they were gonna take the trucks under, really wasn't built to take that kind of transportation. But they wouldn't allow us to enter our expert to talk about that. That was kind of
pay for the road?
right.
who's
Like,
gonna pay for
gosh,
the
you guys
bridge?
spent $73 million on this railroad overpass, but it really wasn't built to have this kind of traffic under it.
Yeah,
You
it's
know.
gonna cost the county
Right.
money to fix the road, because it's not gonna be the company.
Well, the
that
county
pays
and
for
the town, so, because the roads there, there's state highway,
County
and
and
there's
local.
town roads and county, and they're all mixed up back in there.
Right.
And the trucks, but the trucks affect all these towns around it.
Yeah.
I see here in College Park, down to University Park, through Hyattsville, Brentwood, along Route 1, I see those dump trucks driving up and down the road through downtown College Park. And I see them go through lights. I see the barrel concrete trucks cruising around the corner at Jefferson Street in Hyattsville where people are trying to cross. I see the same thing at Knox Road, and I mean, it's just, you know, and it's all, and the thing is, when there's a point here, like on the map, for some area around it, like you're saying, Rebecca, is an aggregated truck impact of that, both the roads and traffic.
It should be necessary, it should be a requirement in permitting a point source that you have to report on mobile source pollution affiliated with the point. It should be, that should be part of the permitting, and that it is not, is a benefit to the company and a detriment to the service.
Right, and the thing is that there should be a way for that to be compensated for by the business.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
roads that the heavier industrial traffic versus sort of public use. You know, the public use gets, you know, overused by the commercial use.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
commercial use doesn't have to pay.
And they shouldn't be allowed to drive at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when everyone's just trying to go home. I mean, this is the other thing, is like there should be
For
limited
kids,
time.
the school
There's,
stuff.
right, when
Yeah.
kids get out of school,
Yeah.
there shouldn't be these, I'm
Or-
gonna get.
Or in Buzzard Point,
So
they
what-
got, oh, sorry,
Yeah.
they got it so that, right, the trucks don't go through the neighborhood supposedly, but there's no enforcement
Yeah,
whatsoever, and then the
right.
DOT says, oh, well, if you see any violations, let us know. I'm thinking, that's not the community's responsibility, where's your GPS on the truck? Oh, no, they're contractors, so we don't
Right.
put GPS, right? They're contractors, so we can't put GPS on.
I read a GAO study that an 80,000 pound truck, which is, the concrete truck might be 60 to 70. The equivalent damage it's the equivalent damage to the road as like 425 mid-sized cars driving through the space. Yeah, so
And then
it's just
you know
like, yeah, you'd have to
Yeah.
drive my little Corolla like 425 times, thing stretched out with just one. One
Now,
piece of-
Yinka, and we haven't, if anyone hasn't had a chance to wait, to ask questions,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
giving space for people, no, I've been,
Yeah.
I'm thinking everything, and I'm just very excited in the short term for the win, which probably is great.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
I definitely agree with the idea that this could be a great time for the advocate policies to take force in the legislature. And I think that there are a lot of new folks who would be more receptive and understanding of that framework. So that's something that I haven't even considered. And then I'm wondering if there are any sort of secondary thinkings that have emerged from this win. Yeah.
Meaning what, secondary thinking?
Like something like this, right? So like, okay, now may be a great time to do like a cumulative impact initiative, or is there any follow-up with the community about pursuing like a historical preservation agenda for the church, or other secondary things like that? I'm curious.
So, I mean, one of the thoughts that I've had about this is that I've been a community activist in this community for 30 years. I've lived here 30 years and done lots of campaigning. But what I've learned about this one in particular is how important it is to have legal counsel. And I think we need to put together some kind of fund to help communities get the legal help they need. In terms of stalling, when we first, I thought this was a great example. We show up at the zoning hearing examiner and we're like, we've got to call for a delay because we just got an attorney and he's not up to speed yet. She's like, no. And was like, yeah. Okay, I'll give you, 3 hours? Oh no, I'll give you 3 days. Oh, I'll give you, And so we got our attorney at exactly the right moment, which was a little too late, but it turned out fine. But I mean, we're amazing. This group is amazing. But I don't know if we would have won and if we hadn't had legal counsel, pro bono legal counsel. And we don't have money. I mean, it wasn't like we could hire someone for $100,000 and say, here, help us out. Also, we wanted the university, not to be repeated, we wanted the University of Maryland Law Center to be part of it. And they were, that was the first place we went. Nancy and I had a meeting, and you guys, and they would not take us on because they were having a staff change. And that was probably the first time I felt like, okay, we can't do this alone. This is too big. And we also were working with another organization that a few years earlier had gone through this and had one loss kind of, and that was kind of there, and they were advising us too. And they had the University of Maryland Law Center. So I think that to me is a learning, is that to fight something like this, that's already grandfathered in a community that is jobs, that you really do have to have the legal counsel to help you navigate this and also bring up the legal issues in the county. And it's very incestuous. I mean, the zoning hearing examiner is best friends with this person, is best friends with this person, is best friends with this person. So it's kind of like, you're clear when you're in this room that you're the outsider, right? Right, that we are not best friends with.
So Denise, I think those are really good points. I think those are other things, I think it's become clear to us, and we're sort of at the stage where we've had the win, we're all pretty wiped out. we're really interested in, we're moving forward now. So we have still the case to be attentive to. So we're at the stage of really considering all these things, like how do we spend our energies? You know, how do we maybe recruit some other assistants? Because, you know, a lot of other things haven't gotten done in this last 2 years because, and a lot of us have, Chris and I work at Forklift, and we have a lot of work, community development work that's very much connected. We also run the local CDC, so we have many hats, and we're pulled in a lot of directions. So thinking about the next step is kind of really important consideration. But the community organizing piece is really central over time to this. And part of it was that, I think also that it's like there's a symbiotic relationship between showing, you know, there's a million, like in DC, there's AU, there's Catholic, there's GW, there's Georgetown, there's a million law clinics and schools. Somebody there will probably help. So the thing is, it's important, the legal piece is important. But it became really clear when we were at the hearings and listening to other people coming doing stuff who didn't always have sufficient representation, that it was very powerful for the citizens to just show up and say simply why. Because those are the arguments that are the real arguments. They're the arguments that are going to fit into some legal framework, like adverse impacts. That's a huge one for all these special exceptions, to be able to demonstrate, and it's probably true in every community. So what you get to is you've got to keep organizing, but the other piece is it's clear to us that there has to be a bigger picture with development. Yes, and so we have talked about the need for, and this could maybe be more of a tri-state or river focus, is accountability for development in communities, and to organize around that bigger picture piece where we can support each other, network, and discuss strategy and learnings with each other. Because the development piece is going to keep happening. That's not going to stop. They're going to keep trying, and they're going to try to do it as cheaply as possible. So it's really important for us to be talking with each other outside of the realm of where, you know, Ernest Meyer, for example, counsel can come listen to us, try to figure out what we're doing. But to have these conversations with each other. And also then to figure out, like you were saying, Andy, what structural pieces can we begin to get some buy-in? Whether it's DC City Council, it's some counties in Virginia along the water, it's Maryland, various counties. And what we can look around stuff that can reinforce sort of, you know, a lot of the younger people with a more social justice mindset and hook them into this and begin a process. Okay, if we get this, maybe we can get this and this. So those are going to be really important learnings and sharing that, you know.
So I would just want to add, do not underestimate the power of community to show up to testify.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and to submit comments by call, by fax, by email, consistently, you know.
It moves the legislators.
It moves.
A lot of the comments were cited in the county's
Pages of
ruling.
comments.
Yeah, pages and pages.
Pages of
Yeah.
comments, but the continuous pressure, you know, up to that hearing point of the district council on both appeals. But significantly the first appeal.
And the move to the remote, I mean, so part of the issues is that some of the zoning hearings, some of the, you know, county, they're at like 10:30 a.m. on
They're always
Tuesday.
during,
That's the problem.
they're always during the business week
Right.
and business hours.
Yeah.
And so did you find through
We had
this
to beg and
process?
plead people to get there.
Yeah, so
But
did
they
you find through the process any, you know, how to recommend, or because it's so important to have community show up? You know, I think this is a issue across, you know, issue people are trying to weigh in on, is that like these hearings happen in the middle of the day. I mean, it's true on the state level as well. The Annapolis hearings are when they start at 1
Yeah,
p.m.
I think we were really strategic about, you know, there were a lot of hearings over the course of these 2 years, months, but there are some it was really important to have as many people, and others that
Yeah,
we're not
it's
gonna
not
ask,
so
we're not
important.
gonna just keep asking people to keep showing up.
So it's that small group
Yes.
of organizers you could help, you could.
Right.
We could discern, but we thought would be.
Yeah, we try to be careful.
Yeah, we really
Yes.
want to be respectful of people's time.
Right, so zoning hearing examiner, hearings and the appeal hearing before the district council. Yeah.
So being able to
Yeah.
identify,
Yeah.
not only, follow along, like stay above the fray, but then those really key,
Yep.
key
Yes.
points, okay, that's a
Yeah.
Yes, and, yeah,
I think
and
that's
keeping
a-
messaging clear and,
That's the
and
same.
clear, simple, and, on the part of the community, sending that clear, simple message as well.
When we needed that, when we didn't. So
Yeah.
And it's just having
people's time.
you too, like you keeping to the facts, I think, is something that
Yeah.
it just sounds like was
Yeah.
so important, because it just lends your organizing efforts that much more credibility.
Yep.
Right.
Especially with elected officials,
Right.
especially because you didn't get into like the negative tactics, you just got into
Nope.
like, this is hurting us, this
Yeah.
is how. To Andy's point, taking something like this and turning it into more of a, like, adding to this and then helping other, connecting with other communities.
Well, and
is so important.
I guess the one thing I wanted to say too is that, one of the great victories that you had was having, the county council sitting as the district council to vote unanimously the right way
Yeah.
on environmental justice. And
Yeah.
so
Yep.
it would be great if we can figure out how to lock them into a position where this is what we do. And when we
Yeah.
heard Jolene, talking about like sort of what, and they're all talking about sort of what every local official these days, like, oh, we really care about the people. But when they actually vote that way, it's kind of like, okay, this is great, because it's almost like a brand of Prince George's County.
Yeah.
Our officials like vote our way. It's a relatively recent thing
Yeah,
that this
it
may
is.
be happening.
Well,
and
and
so-
it's partly because of the change in the council.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a good, perfect storm. We knew that. We also knew that the council was gonna change over. And we also wanted, the things to drag out long enough that
Yeah.
the decision would be made by the new council. So
Right.
we
Exactly.
were very aware of that.
Yeah, they defer
Might
the
have been a very
decision.
different story. than-
That's actually a really good point.
That is a
Yeah.
good point.
I have to go. Coming back later on, but I believe.
Okay.
So,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Thanks.
This is a great
Yeah,
conversation.
We have about 15 minutes left in the session, so we can keep talking.
So Rebecca, one of the things that you and Rick, Rika were the recipient of this, is one of the things we decided early was around that organizing, to have what we called an influencer email list of our goal was about 100 people that we felt were within the community or were very invested in our work. And so and it takes a lot of time, but initially to get those 100 people on an email group and then to communicate to them, right? Because they were influencers. It was such and such, but she represented 10 other people, or this, so even though it was 100 people, those people represented maybe, let's say 300 people or 500 people, and those are the ones that we were trying to get to work on our behalf as well. We wanted them to show up at these hearings. And we also, I thought one of the other things that was really cool for us is that every time we needed people to come, we gave ourselves a number. We'd say, okay, we really want 50 people there. We really want 30 people. So my job for a week was I have a tally on I'm like, okay, they say, how many people have said yes? I'm like, okay, we're only at 25, guys. So you send out another, and he'd go, okay, we're at 30. Okay, and then to be there in the lobby when they all came, right? Thank you for coming. Oh my God, you got your red shirt on. Let's go. And then the other thing that I do is every single person who showed up got a thank you within hours of their coming. Thank you so much. And then that person also got an email a week later to say what happened.
Yeah.
That decision, da-da-da. And so to me, that was such an important part of the organizing tool. And we kind of really finessed it. Like this is the way we're gonna do this. And
Well, it became very efficient
it was very efficient.
to a degree, and that's the thing about
People were invested in the decision, right, Nance?
totally.
They felt like they were, this one woman can't come up to us and she'd say, oh my God, I feel like this was my win too, She was there at every single hearing. She got acknowledged. She wore her red shirt. And she's the first one, it's like, it was so gratifying to feel like people really did all this work and felt they were invested in the process and the community. And now every time they go by this plant, they think about it differently, which is what I think Paul was saying in the community. And we had mayors who did not come out and support us.
Oh, they were against us.
They were
Yeah.
against us,
Yeah.
who now are like, yeah, you know.
Some
Wow,
people have changed their tune, and I'll put it that way.
That is super impressive.
Yeah.
Cause I feel like, everybody's on the TV. That's my
Well,
perception.
I think-
Still maybe, but.
Still maybe, but I think that we did a lot of questioning about, getting people to think critically on those standard messages of, you know, this new plant's gonna create 14 jobs. And so what kind of jobs?
Yeah.
You know, what kind of working conditions? What kind of benefits?
Will the people
Yeah.
actually be from the 4 towns?
Will they actually be from the 4 towns? But, so it's, you know, how much will they pay? But a lot of it, you know, we happened to find out in a conversation with the president of the company who told us the health insurance has for an individual a $3,000 deductible and $5,000 for a family. So what kind of health insurance benefits is this
Are
gonna
they
be,
actually get?
you know,
Yeah.
going to get,
Yeah.
you know, in a site like this where they're gonna have silicosis in 10 years. So I think getting people to think more critically, you know, about, you know, this person doesn't live in our community. This person doesn't invest in projects in our community. This person extracts money out of our
The
community.
person doesn't live in our community.
Right, and that you can see how he keeps house. Okay, do you think it's gonna be any different? That he's been there since 2002 and has done nothing to improve.
But I was wondering if you leveraged this at all to get some kind of improvement, where actually run or help, more compliant.
Well, I think we took the position of given the research that we did and the impact that it would have, that we were opposed. What was being proposed was not acceptable, okay?
But you
And those things that, you know, there are a lot of things that the community would want improvements on that are not part of the special exception process at all. And he is under no obligation to do anything about it, and he has demonstrated that, you know, he doesn't want to pay for anything that he doesn't necessarily have to pay for in it all. Now, I would say that there are other activists within the community who played a different kind of role and did go talk to them about these kinds of things. You know, that was the role that they felt they could take, you know, and they had decided not to come out against the application itself. Yeah. So I do think that, but it you know, this process enabled people to play different kinds of roles, you know, in addressing the site. And, you know, this particular activist I'm thinking of, you know, did go talk with them about, look at what your place looks like. You know, you don't sweep, you don't, you know, it's a mess. It's a mess. You don't think people don't see that? So I just think, you know, we're focused very much on the special exception application, which has its limits of what can be done. But I would say that, you know, in looking at a site, our action is focused on this one application. But when we're talking about knowing, you know, the opponent, or it doesn't necessarily have to be focused on one application. You should know everything about them, everything that you can figure out about them. as much as possible, because what may not work in this process will work in another process if you uncover it.
There's a lot of
There's a lot of
information out
things,
there.
there's a lot of information out there to gather, you know. And from what I understand, you know, happened with Curtis Bay, you know, with their incinerator, you know, they were at a point of it had already been permitted, approved and permitted. And under another technicality related to a construction permit, we're able to defeat it, okay? So, you know, which is an amazing thing.
To be this close to having it go through.
Yeah,
Still in the-
right, and actually in process.
We've heard this earlier.
Yeah, and the community organizing, you know.
Yeah.
But to get to the point of getting the permitting authorities to deny the permit is the immense community pressure put on those entities to make that decision. Cannot be underestimated.
We have, so session is scheduled to end in about 5 minutes, so I'm not, so like I wanna, but I'm gonna, have us start to, turn, you know, switch out the computer so if the
Sure.
next speakers
Yeah,
are
yeah.
here, cause I'm not sure.
When
how
is the
to
next one
break-
supposed to start?
Yeah, so,
Cause you're on it.
Yeah, well,
so
I wanted
this-
to get something else to drink.
so that's why I think we can
Yeah.
break a few minutes early, cause we might
Yeah.
be eating into the next break.
Yeah.
You know, there's like water down, do they have water?
There are fountains around,
Maybe we go to the coffee.
but that, I just wanna say thank you so much. I know we had a small crowd, but I think the conversation was really
Good.
Yeah,
everybody,
good.
I really appreciate it, walked away with a lot, and so I wanna thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, that was.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks so
Rebecca.
much,
Thank you.
Rebecca.
And thank you for the work that you do at Community Forklift, just tell them, just.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Wow.